Thank you very much, Urszula, for the introduction, for inviting me for this seminar. And I would like also to thank ENRS for inviting me for cooperation in creating this project devoted to the issue of disinformation. So before I present you the materials we prepared a year ago, I would like to introduce you a little bit to the topic, maybe a little bit explain the problem we have right now with disinformation, especially in the aspect of history, because our materials are, of course, of universal nature, but we are focusing mainly on the problem of disinformation in history. As historians, we need to start with the history, also with the history of disinformation. As you probably know, the phenomena we can now call disinformation, we can observe already during ancient times. For example, during Persian War, Themistocles for a few times was spreading the fake information to mislead his enemies and to encourage them to take the wrong course of action. But of course, next waves of disinformation or fake news, or rather disinformation and fake news, appeared with every technological revolution in the process of spreading information. So we could say that during ancient times, our ancestors were limited only to spreading, for example, some rumors, and with every new tool to spread information, disinformation became dangerous and more dangerous and more dangerous. And for example, invention on print resulted not only with many good things like printing important books, spreading knowledge, but also in printing a lot of fake documents, some leaflets spreading disinformation. The same happened with the appearance of newspapers, mass media, electronic media, etc. But we can say that the real specialists in disinformation organized from the state level were Russians, starting from the 19th century, Tsarist Russia, during which special service of Tsar Okhrana used disinformation as a tool of control of own society, but also as a tool of international relations. And this experience was mastered in Soviet Union, and we can call rightfully Soviets as a masters of disinformation. Especially Soviet special services were using a lot of so-called active measures, and many of them involved disinformation or spreading fake news. Just three examples. So probably the biggest, unfortunately, success of disinformation campaigns by Tsarist Okhrana, protocols of the elders of Zion, printed in Russia almost 120 years ago. Next year we'll have this anniversary. And as you probably know, still in circulation. So very successful disinformation campaign. Many people still believe that this is the original document produced by a secret conspiracy of Jews. Another example from the 1948 brochure prepared under personal control of Joseph Stalin, falsifiers of history. So after publishing by the Americans of the volume of the documents relating to the Ribbentrop-Molotov Pact and Soviet Nazi cooperation between 1939 and 41, the Soviet Union reacted with a disinformation campaign about the roots of the Second World War. It was not only about promoting own vision of history, but also promoting some manipulated documents which were supposed to prove this vision of the past. And the last example from 1998 is very successful Soviet campaign blaming United States for artificially producing AIDS virus. And this campaign, unfortunately, many aspects of this campaign returned to us during the last 3 years. We could observe the same mechanism or even the same fake information recirculating again. And this campaign is one of many of the 1980s because now we know that in the 1960s, the Soviet services started about 4 campaigns of disinformation every year on a world scale. In the 1970s, it was already 8 campaigns of this kind, but in first half of 1980s, this amount reached a number of 40 campaigns every year. And I think it was directly connected with the situation of the Soviet Union. So the more Soviet Union was weak, it was using disinformation to the bigger extent, because disinformation is quite cheap and unfortunately effective way to make harm to your enemies. So if you are weak, you can use, instead of other weapons, this very particular and specific weapon. But after the Cold War was over, we started to think that disinformation is just a problem of the past. And of course, I need to mention that disinformation was used by both sides of the Cold War. Also, Americans and the West also used disinformation campaign, but it's hard to compare it because Soviets were not only mastered in this in using this tool, but also they were misusing democracy, in fact, to spread disinformation. For the Western side, it was much harder to use disinformation in case of the very closed, isolated communist societies. So why it is important now? Of course, we all realized how important disinformation is during the pandemic time, but this phenomenon started to reappear a few years earlier regarding other topics, including history. So the first is the next revolution in spreading information, and invention of internet, and especially appearance of social media created completely new situation, and unfortunately new and great possibilities to spread fake news and disinformation because of lack of, for example, hierarchy. If we compare social media with traditional media, there is no hierarchy. Everyone can spread information. This process is really, really fast. We know that some viral news could spread just in hours or maybe even in minutes. So this is a great opportunity to use this for disinformation. Also, the phenomenon caused by algorithms, which are behind social media, I mean the filter bubble, is also helping, because if you are closed in a specific circle, it is much easier to address a specific disinformation addressed directly to our group. But disinformation, especially this kind which is touching the past, the history, is important now also because in our times, which was called by Zygmunt Bauman as liquid, we are looking for real bold identity, and this identity is usually rooted in the past. So this is a very fragile sphere of our social interactions. So you can produce a lot of emotion if you target your disinformation on this area. Also, existing conflicts of memory. especially connected with the contemporary history, are helping disinformation, because during the conflicts of memory we are unfortunately much more open for disinformation, of course, if it is supporting our version of the past. But of course, the conflicts of memory are not necessarily connected only with the contemporary history. You are probably aware that one of the strongest conflicts of history in the last two decades in Europe was between the Greece and Macedonia, about the legacy of Alexander the Great. Yes, and we could see a lot of mass demonstration, riots, connected with the emotion about the past, so old. Unfortunately, history in during the last years was used as a tool of aggression against the particular countries, and the main state which is using it during the last few years is, of course, Russia. And Russia is promoting a lot of disinformation in the sphere of history. We can prove that, for example, the current war against Ukraine was preceded by the disinformation campaign, which was targeted not only against Ukraine, but also against the East Central European countries to make their position in the European Union much weaker. So maybe it's really time to offer you a definition of the phenomenon. So the first thing I would like to stress is that disinformation is not the same as fake news, because we are used sometimes to exchange those two terms, because the most dangerous disinformation can be based on real facts. It may be not about lying, but it may be about manipulating, depriving the facts, the proper context, using just small quotations from the real documents without the whole context, etc. So in this definition, what you see, the most important thing is that it's conscious. It's a deliberate act with some goals. So those who are producing this information are willing to force us as recipients of this information to do or not to do something, like for example, to vote for a specific political party, or not to go voting at all, to go to the streets to protest against something, etc., etc. And of course, there is a specific of historical disinformation, because sometimes it is too hard to explain what is the difference between disinformation and, for example, regular debates among historians. So first thing we need to explain our students is that not every difference in opinions among historians is connected with disinformation. Maybe, yeah? Sometimes there is one side which is spreading disinformation, another which is, let's say, defending the truth, but sometimes those are just differences in opinion, views, etc. And we need to differentiate those two things. And of course, not every mistake, for example, made by historian means that he wanted to influence us with a kind of disinformation. So what we can do in this situation, in the world which is full of disinformation, also disinformation regarding history. So we can offer our students knowledge about the mechanism of disinformation, and of course knowledge about the history, because knowledge about the history is very important in preventing of spreading disinformation, but it's not enough. I would say that maybe knowledge about the past is not crucial in this aspect, because we cannot teach our students everything about the past. So none of us is not prepared to recognize disinformation or fake news only by using our own knowledge of history, because there are so many aspects we doesn't know. Next thing we can offer are resources, especially those which are available online, because internet is helping to spread disinformation, but it is also helping us to defend against disinformation. For example, we can teach our students to regularly use fact-checking portals like EU versus Disinfo, for example. It's probably the biggest one in Europe. We can show them sources of trusted information, also those which are available online. So the places in which they can get the trusted knowledge about the past, if they want to check something. Yes, if they want to verify information, they can meet in cyberspace. But the most important thing, I believe, we can give our students are the skills, are the basic skills of historians. And I would like to prove my words a little bit with the example of Stanford History Education Group experiment, which was directly connected with the problem of disinformation and spreading fake news. And in this experiment, a few years ago, they compared three groups of people. So regular students, we call our students right now as digital born, yes, because internet, smartphones, they cannot imagine the world without it. They're using it sometimes, unfortunately, from early childhood. The second group were historians, but not so young, from 40 to 70 years old, and professional fact checkers. And there were a few phases of this experiment. I'm showing you the chart connected with only one of them, so verifying the source of information, the website, which website is trustworthy, which is not. And of course, the best were fact checkers. But if we compare historians and the students with all of their skills in using internet, social media, and everything from digital world with the historians, we can see that historians were much better. And the same result was in every experiment which was conducted. So always historians were better. So my conclusion is that being a historian is giving us specific skills which are really helpful in debunking disinformation. So we can find which information is fake, which is not, only using these skills. So sometimes, of course, not in every case. And of course, we can compare it with another profession, also journalists. Their methods of verification of information are quite useful also in the fight against disinformation. So we prepared a lot of materials I'm going to show you very soon, but please remember that every time when you analyze sources, when you introduce source criticism with your students, you are helping them also with disinformation available online, even if you are analyzing medieval or ancient sources. So now it's time to present you our educational materials. So I'm switching to the Okay, so you are already familiar with our website, and as you saw, a part of it is devoted to disinformation. We call this project now to disinformation, and like it was in other types of material referring to other periods of history or other problems of history, we have quite various material. Here, the first part are animation. You can use, for example, to attract your students to the topic. I will show you not whole because it's 10 minutes long, but a part of our main movie here, How to Win a Memory War. That might be another part. Okay, I think you have the general impression. And of course, we have here also 4 other short movies referring to the social media, probably the not only social media, but also there is also Wikipedia. So internet resources quite familiar to our students. Later on, we have two publications. One is the guide, which I'm going to describe in a minute. Another one is bibliography, which is rather for older students, those who would like to learn more, not only about the disinformation, but also about misusing the past, about the conflicts of memory, etc. So a few words about our guide. I think it's really important part of our project, because it's guiding us on not only through the problem of disinformation, explaining various aspects of the phenomenon, but it's also guiding us in the sense of the whole material we collected in the website. So you can here see the links connected with the other materials, and a few examples, of course, I'm going to show you. We prepared this guide in this form that it can be used both by the teachers and the students themselves. So it's written in quite simple language. And here we are offering the description of the whole methods which are helpful in debunking the fake news and disinformation. So there are practical advices how to recognize the disinformation, starting with typical questions which historian would ask, like who is the author, but there is also and I would say technical advice how to recognize bots or trolls which are active in internet, in a few simple steps, how to analyze the information, how to search for another sources, etc., etc. Even how to check if the photo is real, or if video is real, or if it is really referring to the fact which is described, for example, in the text. Because one of the methods of disinformation is putting the real pictures in the wrong context. Of course, we are focusing not only on digital world. We are showing also the places which are available not only online but also in the real world, in which students can check the information. So I'm not going to show you the whole thing, but maybe in the end we have a short vocabulary, a good practices, so a few basic rules which can help us to avoid being misled by this information. Some useful material like those fact-checking portals, but also publications which are devoted to the problem of disinformation. So this is the guide, but of course we have a lot of other material here. Dozen of articles referring to various aspects of disinformation, historical examples of using disinformation, but also quite technical text describing the algorithm behind, for example, the filter bubble issue, psychological point of view, why we are so open for lies and rumors, and why it is so easy to convince us to some untrue informations. And some of the texts are connected with additional teaching materials. Some are just to be used by the teachers at their will. Of course, you can use everything as you wish, but sometimes there is some special material with advice of some ways to use those texts. So just two examples. The first one is an example of the text without any additional material for teacher. This is the history of the great disinformation campaign, which started already during the Second World War, connected with the cutting crime. Cutting crime was the biggest Soviet crime against the Polish nation during the Second World War. More than 20,000 Polish officers and other representatives of the Polish elite were killed in the spring 1940, and their graves were discovered by Germans in the spring of 1943. And starting from this moment in history, the Soviets started to spread the lie that they are not perpetrators of this crime. And they were producing a lot of brochure books. They even produced the fake materials of the special commission, which was, of course, created of many specialists. But the result of this work of this commission was obvious lie, and this lie was spread almost half of the century, and unfortunately in Russia today is returning to us. But this history is important for us not only because it is a good example of long-term disinformation campaign. Later on, of course, other communist countries were involved in it too, including Poland. But it's also a good example that the truth can win in this war, this memory war, because all the time the various people, especially Poles, were fighting for the truth, and finally they won in the early 1990s, and the Soviet Union in the last 2 years admitted committing this crime. Another example is the text about quite interesting deepfake phenomenon, which is, from my point of view, really dangerous, especially in the field of history. To put it shortly, deepfakes are artificially prepared movies. They can be also pictures. They are using artificial intelligence or machine learning, to be correct, which is using existing, for example, photographs or existing video material to prepare something which is completely false. So I also prepared a short example. So as we know, the landing on the moon in the 1969 was a success, but American authorities were prepared also for not so good scenario. And we know from the archival material the text of the speech in case of tragedy during this mission, which of course was never recorded. But using this technology of deepfake, this material was prepared. So this is just an example, but I think we can all imagine what would happen in, for example, in social media. It could appear such a movie, for example, proving, for example, involvement of one nation against another, using the emotions which are connected with history. Of course, fortunately, there are methods of professional debunking such a material, proving also on technical level that it is fake, but it takes a lot of time to analyze this material and to prove. And in this situation of these big connections of emotions with history, with the past, even few days may be too late to stop a process. So we need to be prepared also for deep fakes. So that's why we have here not only the text describing this phenomenon, but also some special materials you may use during the lesson. So this is a usual set which is necessary to prepare the lesson. So introduction for the teacher with some instructions, with the goals of the lesson, etc. There is a lesson scenario. Of course, it's just our offer. You may change it as you wish. Also, we name here the materials you may need additional, like some sheets of paper, chart, or something like this. But there is a worksheet ready to be printed and distributed among students with a few exercises. So everything you need to do is just to print it, and probably the most important is the source material you may use during or which are required, in fact, in the scenario of this lesson. So if you check the whole material we collected on the website, you will find that some articles are just the text, but in some cases you will find additional material with sources, not only the text. Sometimes there are photos or even documents. So it's I think the time for questions from your side. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for this very interesting presentation. Yeah, I'm happy that you showed the movie as well, because it's very interesting. And I just wanted to underline, there is one sentence there I really like, which is storytelling is one of the most powerful it's a skills or something like this. And I think it's really about the teacher's job, the storytelling. So it's it may have a positive or negative aspect, storytelling, and we can use it as a field, as a shield before against this disinformation. Okay, I think we already got some questions, but I think that for some of them you already replied. I've got a comment. The digital era has showed online disinformation to flourish. A massive disinformation campaign was undertaken by Russia to shape the narrative about the invasion of Ukraine. How we, educators, can fight the Russian propaganda and disinformation across the internet and through foreign and domestic media. So it's I don't know.
So my answer is, of course, as individuals, we cannot fight the whole
system
propaganda industry, which is flourishing right now. Indeed, but what we can do is to prepare our students. First of all, we need to convince them that not every information they may find in internet is reliable, or that there are various levels of information that we need to analyze the information. So this is just a general knowledge about the disinformation, but I think what we can do is to show them on examples how disinformation works, why some even quite popular information circulating in the social media, for example, are fake or are the part of disinformation, to introduce them to the regular habit of checking information. So I think all of us should be prepared. I would say in this aspect, we may even say that everyone should be partially historian right now, not in the sense to write about the history, but to be a historian in our attitude to the information. So maybe the most basic thing is do not believe in everything you find in internet.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I've got a comment as well that the sound has been switched off for the Nixon recording, but it's the link to the video with Nixon is part of the scenario about the deep fake. So you can, if you will enter the website, you will just go to the scenario about the deep fake. The recording is there, and you can show it to your students. Okay, I've got another question. Could you mention again the fact-checking portal? It can be found at the end of the guide, isn't it?
Yes,
yeah.
But the most important one is EU versus disinfo. Unfortunately, the problem with those fact-checking portals is that they are focusing mainly on politics, economy, not on history. A big part of the current disinformation is referring to history, especially to the history of the Second World War, but not only. But in the guide, you will find also the special portals in which students may ask for checking the information. Yeah, because EU versus disinfo is just publishing on a regular basis articles which are debunking the fake news or disinformation, but there are special portals in which you can just ask the question. And of course, there are also specific portals devoted to the fake news in history.
And it's really in several languages, so you can check EU versus disinfo. It's not only in English. There's a thank you message, but we still have like 10 minutes. So if you have more questions, you're really very invited to ask them. Maybe I will just I will give you just a minute, and I will speak about like some things I would like to mention as well. Yeah, this is the website Łukasz was talking about. So EU versus disinfo. It's, for me, it just appeared in Polish, but it can be found in another languages. I'm still waiting for your questions, but not to forget, I would very much ask you to fill the survey after our meeting, after it will end, because as I mentioned, it is founded by the EU, so that's why we can make it free and available for everyone. And Michaela will post you information which can be used to fill the survey, because it requires like password reference of the project. Yeah, so you can fill it out.
So I see the question regarding the age limit. The guide you can use on every level, but in some cases of some materials like articles, there are, for example, photos which are not appropriate for the young children. So the whole material, I think, is 12 plus.
It's the license is open, so you can change them if you like. Yeah, I think that if there are not more of the questions, Łukasz, do you want to comment on the end of our webinar?
So maybe I may add, using those few minutes, a few comments about the current situation, because I just briefly mentioned that Russia is now the main producer of disinformation and fake news, but of course this is not the only country. For example, Turkey is quite active in one aspect, Armenian genocide. Turkey is also producing some amount of disinformation, but maybe I will elaborate a little bit more this issue, what methods are used. As I said, Russia is focusing mainly on the Second World War and the genesis of Second World War. And it is because this period is quite crucial, not only for state propaganda, but also for national feelings, I would say, of the Russian. So they're trying to protect it on the one hand, but on the other hand, the goal of this disinformation, for example, accusing other countries for responsibility for the outbreak of the Second World War, is used to make a kind of mess in the general knowledge about the Second World War. So this is the way of thinking. Of course, we cannot erase the Ribbentrop-Molotov Pact or Hitler-Stalin Pact from the history, but we can introduce into especially digital space a lot of other versions of the beginning of the Second World War, some fake informations about the alleged similar pacts signed by other countries with Germany, etc. Another goal of this disinformation, which sometimes is using the true facts but just manipulating them, is to make the impression that the East Central European are somehow dangerous for the Europe, were ruining the peace in Europe, and it always was like that, as that we are the source of the trouble, not Russia itself, but other countries. So this is the level of disinformation which is focused on the West. Yes, to use history to make the proper, from the Moscow point of view, proper image of East Central Europeans. But there is also a stream of this disinformation which is addressed exactly to specific countries with the purpose, for example, of destabilization of the internal situation, starting some trouble to make more difficult, for example, supporting Ukraine. And this stream of propaganda or disinformation is also using history. For example, in the Czech Republic, in the last years, the case of the monument of Marshal Konev in Prague was used as a pretext for this kind of disinformation to start some internal arguments, division of opinion inside the country.
I would like to just share you for a while because we've got a teaching resource which is called The Great Falsification in 20th Century. And then we've got the example of a genocide in Rwanda, but as well the exercise about the Armenian genocide. So there is a source text, short text, what's the like the falsification is about. So why Turkey doesn't want to claim the Armenian genocide, and students, they're just answering the questions, and they're making a mind map here, for example. So they need to fill the sentence. Those who cannot remember the past, they're condemned to repeat it, and those who falsified it, so they can just put their own end of the sentence and then fill the mind map. This is based on what Łukasz said about accepting fact of Armenian genocide. I've seen another question, but I don't know if it's easy to ask to answer actually. Do you have Russian students interested in that topic? From my point of view, as a coordinator, I cannot tell. Because the origins of the people taking part in the projects or using the materials, they are very, very different.
I not only think, but I know that there are students in Russia and abroad who are interested in this topic. There were and still are memory studies in Russia as a part of program, or even bigger programs connected with it, or with the public history. There are also many Russian scholars who are analyzing not only the conflicts of memory or the politics of memory of the Russia, but also disinformation campaigns. But unfortunately, right now it's quite dangerous, especially if you do it in Russia. Because you may be punished for this. Yes,
and like there has been Nobel Prize given to the Memorial Associate. So this is like the Russian-based group of people as well. Okay, I think that we're finishing shortly. Thank you very much for a very interesting presentation, and thank you very much all our participants. I see that you Romanians and Hungarians are writing that you are targeted by the disinformation. That's why we're on the same boat, we're on the same page here, and this is like our common tasks, and there is a lot we can do on the side of educators and teachers. That's why we're very happy that you came today and took part in the webinar, and we stay in touch. We'll send you an email with presentations and with all the links, and as well information about our next projects, webinars, and new teaching resources.